Earlier in the show, I mentioned I had the Attorney General of Missouri, Josh Hawley, on. We talked about this Supreme Court case from Central Missouri. And before he was elected Attorney General, you know that Josh Hawley was a professor of law, and he specialized in constitutional matters at the University of Missouri. He came out and expressed his thoughts on this case a long time ago, before he was an elected official. And he is of the belief that the Missouri Constitution does not prevent a school, a church-related school, from receiving some benefits. In this case, it was a grant from the state. He didn't see that as a problem, but that's the question that's come up surrounding this school. Now, the Attorney General has recused himself from this case, and they recused him. He recused himself primarily because he had given an opinion on it. And he didn't feel, because his opinion was known beforehand, that it was going to be proper in this particular case for him to come out and represent the state of Missouri, in other words, is what I'm trying to say. You can listen to Josh Hawley's interview, but right now we're fortunate enough to have the director of that Trinity Lutheran School, Annette Keeney, joining us on the phone, along with an attorney who represents the Alliance Defending Freedom that's been helping shepherd this case through the courts all the way to the Supreme Court. That attorney is Carrie Kupek. Thank you both for being with us.
Thanks for having us on. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So I guess, first of all, Annette, let me start with you. Take us back to the beginning of this case and kind of explain the grant that you realized was available and what you wanted to use it for at Trinity Lutheran.
Sure. Well, we were looking to make our playground safer, and so we were replacing a piece of equipment, and then we were also looking at what we were going to put on the ground under it. And, you know, as a mother and as the director of the school, we wanted to make it as safe as possible for the kids. So we were looking at what would be the softest on their bodies when they fell. We had seen the rubberized surface, and we decided that would be best for them. When they fell, it wouldn't scrape, it would be soft. And so we had heard about the Missouri Scrap Tire Program grant, and we decided to apply for it.
So that program, I'm not asking you to explain it, but was basically the state had recycled a bunch of tires, and to be environmentally safe, they'd found a good way to put them to use, and that's where the grants were offered, not dollars, but material, right?
So basically, it was open to nonprofits to apply, and everybody who buys new tires pays into it, and it's put on by the Department of Natural Resources as a way to recycle tires and keep them out of the landfill.
So
This is Carrie.
Yes, Carrie.
I'm just gonna throw in something about the program. It's a reimbursement grant program. So in other words, any nonprofit that ultimately gets accepted into this state program from Missouri, they have to show receipts. They have to lay out their own money first to pay for this rubberized playground surface, and then they show receipts, and then the state refunds or gives back them a portion of that money.
So Carrie, while I've got you there, the grant was applied for. They were denied because of their connection to the church. At that point, did you start the defense of Trinity Lutheran immediately at that point? Were you the organization that challenged this in court?
Yeah, so this case has been going on for several years now, and unfortunately, the courts kept essentially throwing the legal challenge out at the district level, the appellate level, and so really yesterday, the Supreme Court was the first court to really tackle this case head on. And so we were obviously very pleased that the Supreme Court agreed to take this case up, but also not entirely surprised, because at the heart of this case is a very fundamental issue. Will people of faith and religious organizations in America have the freedom and be allowed to participate equally in generally available public benefit programs such as this playground resurfacing program in Missouri.
And the argument against you in this particular case by some has been that it is a slippery slope, and they bring up the separation of church and state. And I talked to Josh Hawley earlier, the Missouri Attorney General, who obviously agrees with your point of view on this. And
Josh filed an amicus brief on behalf of the preschool.
Right. And but explain from your arguments to the court, your presentation to the court, why that's not the case. Why religious-based schools should have availability of these funds. I mean, to me, it's not a question of establishment of religion, which is what the separation of church and state was about.
You're right. It's about safety. And the real slippery slope is if a state is allowed to discriminate against a religious organization like Trinity Lutheran's preschool, what else can they deny them? For instance, fire and police protection. If a state was removing asbestos from its buildings across the state, if a city is fixing the streets and sidewalks, these are also generally available secular public benefits that people participate in equally across this country. And what's interesting is that the Supreme Court justices also were honing in on this very fact. In fact, the majority of the justices seem to be troubled by this exact slippery slope, this idea that we could deny a religious organization, a synagogue, a mosque, a temple, something even to the extent of extra terrorist protection just because of their religious status. And that kind of discrimination on the basis of religious status is unconstitutional and has never been allowed in this country.
Interesting. You referred to it there, but I did read several articles where it said that the questions from the court largely seemed to be in support or questions that certainly didn't seem in opposition to your arguments here.
Yeah, the majority of the court seemed quite favorable towards the preschool. And again, it's because what's at stake here. The fact that religious organizations could be denied these safety public benefits is quite troubling. And I think one of the questions that was put out at one point to the state was, well, if there's a situation where a state or a community is on high alert because of a potential terrorist threat, would you deny the funding to that particular religious school or organization to hire the extra security needed to protect against that? And the state said yes, they would deny funding for those kinds of things as well. So this is obviously something very concerning. I don't think anybody, the government or not, wants to tell, say, a church that they can't call the fire department if a fire breaks out because they happen to be religious. Yeah,
good point. That is Carrie Kupek we're talking to from the Alliance Defending Freedom. They're handling the legal side of this. Annette Keeney, let me bring you back in as director of Trinity Lutheran Preschool. When this all started 5 or 6 years ago, did you really think you were going to end up in the U.S. Supreme Court? I mean, you've taken on something here that a lot of people are passionate about. And what's your reaction to how far this has gone so far?
I think that when we very first applied and 44 nonprofits applied and we ranked number 5 and they awarded it to 14, we thought it would have stopped right there. We were number 5 and we should have gotten the grant then. So we were surprised that it had to even go farther than that. And it felt like discrimination right there, like we were being treated as second-class citizens right then.
Yeah, well, thank goodness. Because of our religion. Thank goodness for the Alliance Defending Freedom that who are able to come in and help out, because I mean, quite frankly, most religious organizations wouldn't have the financial resources to fight something like this all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and I think it really boils down to one principle, and that's the safety of every child should matter. And it's important to remember, too, that over 90% of the children who attend the preschool at Trinity Lutheran, they actually don't even attend, right? And that they don't attend the church itself. How many kids exactly? So out of the 110 children that are enrolled in our school, 4 of them go to our church.
Wow.
And then our playground is also open on the weekends and after hours for the community to come play on our playground. So it is definitely a resource for many other children besides just the ones that go to our church. And we, of course, want all of those kids to be safe on our playground.
Yeah, those are surprising numbers. Carrie, when do you expect, are we getting a ruling on this by June? That's the end of the session, right?
Yeah, I would say we can expect to see a decision then. And I think it's important to remember that Trinity Lutheran's Learning Center, they're not asking for special treatment. They're just asking to not be treated worse than everyone else. And we certainly are hopeful that the Supreme Court will prioritize the safety of children and make sure that everyone, regardless of whether they are religious or not, are able to participate equally in society, especially when it comes to these generally available public safety benefits.
Well, thank you for fighting the good fight. Carrie Kupek, I appreciate your time. Annette Keeney, thank you so much for making yourselves available. I know it's been a whirlwind the last 24 hours, being in front of the Supreme Court and all of that, so we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, good talking to you. Thank you both for being with us. And there you have it, straight from the mouths of the folks that were in front of the U.S. Supreme Court yesterday on this Trinity Lutheran case that affects us right here in Missouri. And I wanted them to kind of put this in context for you so you could get a feel for what they're talking about. It's not like they want to be treated any differently than anybody else. They want their kids to be safe. Makes a lot of sense. 314-969-9797. We'll get Amy and Riley Fitzmaurice in here in a few minutes, and I want you to hear their story and what this young lady is going through as she awaits a liver transplant. We'll be right back.
The Mark Cox Show on FM News Talk 97.1, 98.7, AM 1490, and 97.1talk.com.